Assalamu alaikum, I'm Aisha and you're watching Samaa News. Here are today's headlines. Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban regime have agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire, effective from 6 p.m. today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed. Officials say the truce was requested by the Afghan Taliban regime and finalised through mutual consent, following days of heightened tensions along the border. Just before the ceasefire was announced, Pakistan's Western Front remains highly active, with the army launching a series of powerful retaliatory operations against Afghan Taliban-backed militants across multiple sectors. In Mohmand District, troops foiled a major infiltration attempt, killing 30 Khawarij terrorists. Another operation in Abakhel brought the total militant death toll to 37. Further south, in Nushki, the army gave a decisive response to Taliban aggression, reclaiming the Ghaznali post and hoisting the Pakistani flag. Over in Kurram, precision strikes destroyed Taliban tank positions and killed a key commander. While in Chaman, early morning attacks were repelled with up to 20 militants killed. Security sources say more than 200 Afghan Taliban fighters and Indian-backed militants have been killed since fresh border clashes began 4 days. The Pakistan army remains on high alert amid the ceasefire, determined to crush every attempt at cross-border aggression. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he doesn't believe China wants to be an agent of chaos, despite tensions over rare earth export curbs. He told reporters in Washington that a Chinese official had warned of global chaos if US port fees went ahead, but added that Beijing is unlikely to take that path. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte says more than half of NATO countries have agreed to join a new program to buy US weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. Speaking after a defence ministers' meeting in Brussels, Rutte also announced fresh counter-drone measures after a series of suspected Russian airspace incursions. Germany has announced plans to spend €10 billion on drones in the coming years. Defence Minister Boris Pistorius made the statement at the NATO defence ministers' meeting in Brussels, adding that Berlin will lead an EU air defence shield and boost air policing, with 2 Eurofighters to be deployed in Poland from December. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he discussed US gas supplies with Greece's Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis as Ukraine faces power shortages from Russian attacks. He added that his meeting with US President Donald Trump on Friday could help bring the war with Russia to an end. The US has warned Russia of serious consequences if the war in Ukraine does not end. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Washington and its allies are prepared to impose costs on Moscow for its continued aggression, adding that the War Department stands ready to act. Ukraine has urged Britain to officially label Russia a terrorist state. Speaking to MPs in London, Ukraine's Parliament Speaker Ruslan Stefanchuk delivered a diplomatic note activating a 100-year partnership between Ukraine and the UK, first signed by President Zelenskyy and Prime Minister Keir Starmer earlier this year. At least 10 people have died and 18 others were injured after an oil tanker caught fire while under repair in Indonesia's Batam city. Police say the vessel was not carrying oil when the fire erupted, and the cause is under investigation. The US federal government shutdown has entered its 3rd week after the Senate failed to pass a short-term funding bill. The deadlock has forced museum closures, air travel disruptions, and layoffs across key agencies, as thousands of federal workers remain without pay. Russia says it is ready to resume gas supply talks with Europe. Speaking at an energy forum in Moscow, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said Moscow remains open to reliable and affordable energy cooperation, adding that global demand for both hydrocarbons and renewables continues to rise. China has warned the European Union against setting preconditions for Chinese investments, saying it firmly opposes forced technology transfers and protectionist practices. The EU is considering new rules that could restrict Chinese firms, but China insists trade must remain based on mutual benefit. IMF strategy chief Jayla Pazabashiolu says the US and China remain committed to global debt relief efforts despite ongoing trade tensions. Speaking to reporters at the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank, she confirmed that both sides will join the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable today to push talks on easing debt pressure for developing nations. And global carbon dioxide levels have hit the highest ever recorded, according to the World Meteorological Organization. The UN agency says CO2 rose by 3.5 parts per million in a year, the biggest jump since 1957, driven by fossil fuel use and wildfires. According to the agency, rising CO2 and other greenhouse gases could trigger more extreme weather worldwide. That's all for now. For more updates, visit www.samaa.tv. Thank you for watching Samaa News.